Mustache Tales.
Yeah!
Hello, it's Jay Chandrasekhar, and...
Oh, Hayes MacArthur.
I sprung that on you. Usually I just say it's Jay Chandrasekhar and Hayes MacArthur, and I felt like I was hogging the limelight. But anyway, we're doing a podcast of Mustache Tales today, and it's just me and Hayes. We could have gotten a guest, by the way. We just decided to introduce you to ourselves a little more so that you're a little more, excited when in interview somebody else. Regardless, it's just going to be us today. So, Hayes, I think you got the story today.
Yeah, I got the story. I remember, I'm sorry, I just went dark for a second. I'm caught back up now. Did we talk about, we did this once before where it was just you and I, which is actually the origin of why we decided to start recording these, because it was you and I from the beginning, just shooting the shit.
That's right. And often it was in bars, and often it was after joints.
That's right.
And often it was just such hilarity and fun that we thought, we got to get America in on this.
Let's do it. So in keeping with the premise of the show, we like to start with a story and go from there. And we were talking before the show about what the story would be. And so I'll take this one. And my story today is, you know how you always tell your kids, if you're doing, when you just want one big idea to get through to them, right? We tell them a million things through the course of their lives and how to micromanage situations, big situations, little situations. But one thing that my parents told me growing up was one moment can change your whole life. That's something that stuck with me. Just remember, Hayes, like one little moment, your whole life can change. And so I kind of always had that in the back of my head. So my story today is about a moment that I guess changed a trajectory in my life. And, I will say before I tell the story that even knowing the lesson doesn't matter. You still are going to have the one moment. It could be, it could be anything, but the thing, it can change in an instant. So I got kicked out of college my junior year.
Bowdoin.
Up in Maine, small liberal arts school, Bowdoin. Great school, love the school, have so many fond memories of it, except for this one instance where I ended up getting kicked out I got into a fight at a party, and it was off campus. We had Ryan Leaf on the show a couple months ago, and Ryan Leaf talked about a moment that kind of changed his life. Well, he had many in his arc, but one of them was when he was retiring from football and he was kind of down on his luck. He went to a fight in Vegas and someone gave him a pain pill. Yeah. And he decided to take, it's like Alice in Wonderland shit. Like he took the pill.
Right after the whole audience booed him.
That's right. The whole audience booed him, and he took this pill and he didn't feel anything. I just was tripping on that when I thought of a moment. But the reason that this moment kind of ended up having like a lot of repercussions was I got in this fight. I was supposed to go study abroad my junior spring. And that changed, and I ended up going out to LA and getting into the entertainment business and becoming an actor and working in comedy, and now sitting here talking to you. And that happened when I was like 20 years old. I got in this fight, and the story behind the fight was it was a Saturday night. I was at a very small school. There weren't like a lot of bars or clubs. Everything happened in close quarters, and this was a house that a bunch of my friends had lived in who were older than me. And it was literally called the crack house because it looked like a crack house. There weren't any hard drugs happening at this place, but it was called the crack house. And I would say that the equivalent of having the entire campus packed into this house would be like putting, let's say 30% of the campus is there. So that's like 500 people in like a 4-bedroom house. And there was a basement to this house that when you walked into the basement was like a 1-bedroom apartment with hundreds of people there. And I walked into this basement party one night, and it was like, just wall to wall, like people, like if you were holding a cup, you had to have it in your, like next to your chest because you had no arm space, nothing. And so I will say that there are, Rashomon, many points to this story. I can't speak for the individual that I got into the altercation with, but I can tell you pretty clearly, and my story has been the same for decades, of what I was interpreting in this moment.
Were you a fighter?
I had been in like maybe one fight prior to that.
Okay.
But I was running with a group of fighters, like a bunch of like kind of tough Boston guys.
Football players.
Football players. And it seemed like everywhere we went, there would be a fight. And I was always like on the outskirts of it, either making jokes or trying to break it up. But I was around a lot of this. So it might have been, I guess, in retrospect, normalized behavior to just to fight like this when you drink. So I walk into the basement of this party. It's shoulder to shoulder. The ceiling is about, 3 feet tall. It's like, I think the ceiling in Being John Malkovich was taller in that tiny room he went into. It was that kind of pressurized situation. You know what they say? Contents under pressure will explode. So I'm down there and I'm standing next to one of my buddy's girlfriends, and she has a red Solo cup in her hand, and I'm down there and we're talking, and all of a sudden there's this kind of violent push and it knocks her over to the ground and she falls in this tightly populated space. And I saw red. I picked her up and I turned and I grabbed the guy who had knocked her over, and I kind of grabbed him by his flannel shirt lapels, and I sized him up, and it was like a little bit of a smirk or like a what are you gonna do or kind of a situation, and we just started yapping at each other, and then I threw some punches, he threw some punches, we were pulled apart, and that was it in my mind. The entire thing lasted maybe 30 seconds, I guess. We kind of got broken up. The party didn't get broken up. It was a skirmish. People, in my perception, people go, if you're playing a hockey game, you go sit in the penalty box for 2 minutes after something like this. So I stayed out that night, with my friends, carried on. And the next morning I got no blood, but I came to realize that the person that I was in the fight with had a huge black eye. Like almost like if you went into hair and makeup and were like, give me a black eye. Because I had beers with the guy 2 days later as a result of this, what I'll get into, the disciplinary action and everything. When I found out it was becoming a big deal, I called the guy, I said, hey, we got to talk about this. And that's when I looked at him, I said, wow, he's got a big black eye. So safe across the table with him too. So I left the party that night. I got a call from my football coach the next morning, like really early. And this is like when, you had to call like the house phone or whatever. So you have someone wake you up.
You're the quarterback.
I'm the quarterback of the football team, and we're in the middle of the season. Or no, we're like towards the end of the season. And this was after a game. A very tightly contested loss, which, there's probably a lot of things that contributed to this part of my life with it was like, probably touch of anger, some frustration, then mixing some alcohol. And, there you've got it.
Because you started the fight.
I started the fight. Well, I addressed the situation that I witnessed in my mind. Like, if I knock over a girl at a party accidentally, I am like, oh my God, is everyone okay?
Right. He didn't do that.
I'm just in a different, no. So I get in this thing, I get the call from my coach. He's like, he's like, what happened last night? I'm like, what? Like, why is my coach asking me what happened last? And he's like, did you get into a fight? And I told him pretty much the same story that I told you. As my dad says, always tell the truth, because that way you only have one story to remember. So that was my...
Great advice. Great advice.
Great advice, right? So and he says, okay, you're going to need to write that down. And I'm like, what? I got to write it down. He's like, write it down and then come into the football offices. So I'm like, I shower, kind of put down my story. And there was another assistant football coach at the time at Bowdoin who ended up becoming an FBI agent. He was studying law before he went into the FBI. We always referred to him as Agent Prestep. You know, it was like that was his thing because we knew he was going to. So he sits me down. He's like, what's the story? And now I'm like, feel like I'm being prepped for something, which I was.
And he's just studying law at the time.
He's studying law.
No,
he had gotten out. No. He had gotten out of Michigan Law School.
Oh, okay.
Where he was an assistant at the Michigan football program, and he was like coaching at Bowdoin as he waited to get into the FBI. And that's how I thought. So when he's prepping me, I'm now feeling there's something bigger is going on.
Yeah.
And what I soon realized was the rumors and the way the fight was conveyed around this small school did not make me look like a sane or nonviolent person. So much so that I got a call a couple of days later from a friend of mine from high school who was at another college. And an old buddy called me and he said, "Hey, you hit some kid with a pool stick at a party?" And I was like, what? No, I didn't hit someone with a pool stick. So, you know, between the interrogation of the soon-to-be FBI agent and then like high school buddies of mine calling, thinking that I, you know, curb stomped a kid, I was like, wow, this is getting serious. So I ended up, what happened after that? I ended up going in and having one of those like school hearings. It's almost like at the end of Son of a Woman. Remember when Philip Seymour Hoffman and they're in front of the whole school and they're getting asked questions, like they're being adjudicated.
I haven't seen that.
It's like a legal trial. It's a great scene.
It's a great movie.
It's Son of a Woman.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's Chris O'Donnell. And he has
Pacino,
he's
right?
in front of this, and Pacino.
Yeah.
And the court case in that is, did Chris O'Donnell see Philip Seymour Hoffman haze a faculty member? And Chris O'Donnell says he couldn't see it. And he did see it. He knows who did it. So the administrator put him on the hot seat to essentially sell out his friends. And even though he hated these guys, Chris O'Donnell doesn't sell him out. And so he gets kicked out of school. And that's when Pacino gets up and gives the speech. He didn't rat. You know, if I was the man I was 30 years ago, I'd take a flamethrower. Okay. So I was in one of those kind of
is that
intense
where that's where the imitation comes from.
Yes.
I've never seen it, but I've heard everybody imitate him. When I heard them imitate him, I'm like, I'm not seeing it.
That is the movie that made, I don't think Pacino ever left that character. He kind of kept a little of that.
I love Pacino.
He kind of kept a little of that through his whole day.
I love Pacino.
So I was in that. Oh, he's the goat.
Yeah.
So I was in a setting like that, but without a public audience. I was in it was like a courtroom with like probably 6 or 7 other students and then a couple of deans. And I had to call witnesses to my defense as I went into this. I was like, I had to get a character witness.
Did you have a
lawyer?
Had
to get 2. Not yet.
Okay.
Not at this phase.
Not a student lawyer.
Like a kid with a bow tie. Like I just grabbed the biggest nerd on campus. I'm like, hey, can you help me out, man? No, I had to get a character witness who ended up being Howard Vandersea, and then 2 friends who were there at the party, and they had to write statements, and then they would go in and give the eyewitness accounts in this kind of what do they call it? A mock trial or a canary court. And then I realized when I looked at the hearing and I went in there, this was probably like a week later when I was in front of the dean, that the list of quote unquote witnesses that I was bringing to the table, I had like 2 guys, and the list of people who were like quote unquote testifying against me were like 15 people who were at the party. And I was like, I feel like I'm already toast, like, so I asked my 2 buddies who were there, I'm like, hey, can you write down an eyewitness account of what you saw? And I didn't ask the smartest guys in the school to write this. They were just like, kind of like, one of them was a great hockey player, total meathead. He gave like a 2-sentence, like, I was at the party and I saw an altercation, and, he did like a really quick dissertation. Like, he's not somebody to advocate for you. And then another guy who had a previous history of problems with the school anyway, so they weren't going to listen to him.
Your witness was tainted.
Our witnesses were like, it's like bringing up like other members of the Gambino crime family to testify for people in the Gambino crime family.
I didn't see nothing.
Hey, that's right. So anyway, I get this heavy-handed sentence handed down to me, which was essentially like, you're out of here, kid. You're kicked out of school.
For one fight?
For one fight.
Yeah.
And I was doing all right. Like, I was getting great grades. I was doing other stuff. Off campus. So I was crushed, right? I was like, what? I'm kicked out of school. And this is like November of your junior year. So you already pay the tuition, right?
Yeah.
Like, so then it becomes a little bit of a legal thing. Like, wait, you're going to kick me out now. I'm not going to get credit for this year. I've already paid you. I had like, there were like some breach of contract issues going on, with all the other stuff that goes on when you're a young guy too, that you're dealing with. But I wasn't thinking of that at that point. I was just thinking about how it felt to be prejudged or judged by a bunch of things that you're not in control of, right? So I had some issues which made this story feel like I was a villain before people even knew what happened. Like, I was, this kid who was a football player, a meathead, entitled, all of these different kind of outside perceptions that I had never been forced to look in the mirror and realize before. That came years later, that perspective. But I mean, that was like, whoa, how could people think that I'm this monster? So anyway, as a result of this, I ended up, I was doing a play at the same time this semester.
What play? As
I was playing football. It was Oleana, David Mamet play. And
I will interrupt one thing. When Super Troopers 2, the film you were in with us, obviously, when David, there's a quote from David Mamet before the movie had come out. And he goes, I can't believe they're making a Super Troopers 2 because how do you improve on perfection? David Mamet. I don't know what he thought. I don't know if he ever saw it. But I mean,
wait, he said that about the movie?
He said that about the first movie.
That's amazing. I thought it was like some axiom that you applied to it. Like, oh, he said it about the actual
quote from David Mamet. I was like, we made it.
That's so dope. And that's the only review that counts,
Right.
Like, it's the best. So I was doing this play, and so now I'm getting kicked out. We still got like 1 or 2 football games left. I now have to appeal this decision. And I sit down with the dean, like one-on-one. And I'm like, he's like, you're a fucking monster. And by the way, like, I had a lot of football injuries. Like, my hand was like super swollen.
Yeah.
Because I got a helmet in the back of my palm.
Yeah.
So I had to look, this is from the football game, dude. Like, it looked like I was, just this MMA fighter. And he said, so it ended up that I had to leave campus unless I was in class or unless I was in play rehearsal. And I could come back.
Where were we going to live?
This was exactly. I had to drive down to Southern Maine and stay at a friend's parents' house, and then drive into classes. This is why it was being like adjudicated or figured out, because because of the appeal, they couldn't not give me the credit. So I came back, I played in the games, and then I got to do this play rehearsals and then put on the play. It was just a really confusing time. And then it ended up that was the decision that I made, because I sat down with the dean and he said, you should look at this as a moment for you to kind of reassess your track or your life. Like, do something that you wouldn't normally have done. I know you were going to go study your major over there next semester, but this gets back to the thing where your parents tell you one moment can change your whole life. And I was like, I don't want to do anything else other than what I've been doing. Yeah. He goes, well, what are you into? I'm like, fucking football and drinking. He's like, well, you're doing a play. And I go, yeah, I'm doing a play. And he goes, well, why don't you go study theater outside of our theater program? Go somewhere. And so it ended up,
at this point, you were kicked out.
I was kicked out. Yeah.
So he was just trying to be a good guy, trying to say, hey, do something. Look at this as a moment.
That's right. He was, he had severely, I feel like, done me wrong in judging me and, not really taking in my account of the story. He just had wrote me off as a total fucking idiot. But then, that having been said, he was also like, do something that you wouldn't normally do, like with that perspective that like this is your time in your life when you can take those chances.
Were you under any kind of probation when this thing happened?
No.
This is a one strike and you're out there thing?
It was a one strike thing. Yeah.
God, I mean, the number of fights that happened at Colgate.
I know. And then when I ended up going to UCLA and studying acting, and then finished getting some credits at UCLA. And the amount of fights I saw at UCLA outside of like Mahoney's and these like there'd be people like curb stomping and outside of hot dog stands, like huge fights. And the school never heard about it. But I was like at like a very small
1,800
place,
students or something there.
Yeah, it's like a couple thousand kids.
Yeah.
So I ended up, that's how I ended up going out to LA. And I was out there and didn't know one person, ended up meeting friends at UCLA, studying with some teachers out there, and met a girl as it goes. And then I told the girl that I was going to go back to finish my senior year in Maine in college. No, I didn't say Maine. I said Portland. And she was Russian. And she said, like, you going for what? Like 2 months, 3 months? I'm like, well, it's going to be like, 8 months. And then I'll come back here afterwards. And that story kind of, she was Russian.
Okay.
Russian girl.
Mm-hmm.
Actually from I guess like technically, Moscow. And she was like 19. And she ended up coming to visit me my senior year in school, and had never been. That's a different story for a mustache.
Where were you in school?
When she came to visit me when I got back to Bowdoin. But I'll put a pin in the story, because the point of it, the whole thing was, and I say this to my kids, that one moment can change your whole life. But what my parents didn't tell me, and what I'll add an addendum to it when I talk to my kids, is you don't know when that moment's going to happen. And you're never going to know.
It's incredible. I mean, it reminds me, first of all, there were so many fights at Colgate that I mean, like, and by the way, the football players, it's an interesting window into what happened to you, because the way the rest of us look at football players is that they're untouchable. Is that because of the football, they get a secret little special situation, and particularly the quarterback, like, they're never going to get, never, nothing bad's going to happen. Now, the football fraternity used to come down to my fraternity, Beta, and they would come there because they were such rockheads that the girls wouldn't go to their house. So the only place to go where the girls were our house. And so they'd come down there, and there'd be like 12 of them, and there'd be like 40 of us down there, whatever. And they would be flirting with the girls, and they were these big monsters. And we were like, okay, you can hang, have a little beer, whatever. Inevitably, one of them would do something that was just unforgivable. And then it would start a little fight, and then it would be 3 of us on one of theirs fucking guys, and we somehow, like, the other 40 guys would run down from upstairs and go, we just throw them all out. And then, and that was it. But they kept doing it, right? You're like, God, how many times are we going to do this fucking fight? But we, there's a perception about football players that is that they fight because they can't control their emotions outside.
Well, it's also just like some guys, not all guys, but when you're, 17 through like 28, I mean, there's a reason why the military takes people at a certain age range. You're just wired to be confrontational and fight. And you're fighting, I don't even know, it's a testosterone thing or a socialization thing. It's just
the desire to be a hero.
Is that where you think it springs from?
Well, like, I bet a part of you was like, wanted to impress your friend's girlfriend.
Yeah, I think the feeling of righteousness and then being able to do anything you can. You're like literally ready to go to war at the drop of a hat. You're like, give me a fucking reason. Like, I got to put this energy somewhere.
That's right.
Give me a fucking reason. Like, what's going to piss me off in this moment? Is it because, this happened or this happened?
Right.
Yeah.
But the perception thing is, I'll tell the story, which is that, there's a saying, perception is reality, right? And like, that sounds like what happened to you is that, like, first of all, obviously I don't know what you did, but you gave a black eye. That didn't help. There were 500 witnesses. That didn't help. You were on the football team. You're tall, white, and, privileged.
Yeah. And I was hanging with, guys who are still like my close friends, but it was like a lot of belligerent behavior was going on. Yeah. And even though, like, this is at a school too, where the football team, like, the guys who played on my offensive line got like their doctorates in English. They're teaching now. They weren't
right, but in that ecosystem, they were the big, strong meatheads.
That's right. And loved identifying that way. Yeah. Like, the more that you lay down into being dumber and stupider and more aggressive, the more you're rewarded from your immediate peer group, is the more awesome it is in that paradigm.
And like, I get it. It's like, I get it.
Do you think there's a way you can't really break that cycle when, I mean, you got like teenager, like, you see, how do you coach that out of like aggressive, athletic boys?
I think that to some degree,
you don't want to.
Well, I mean, I'm a huge football fan and a huge hockey fan. All those guys who used to come down to our fraternity and throw us around, I'm now fans of them. But the reality is you don't want to, but you want to discourage random cheap shot fights and random fights. And they're not a cheap shot. I'm not saying it was a cheap shot, but you know what I mean? Like, I think that guns to some degree have taken the fun out of fighting because anything can happen now, right? I mean, there's so much, like, somebody can run back, get a gun, and then good God. So maybe there's fewer fights, I would think. I mean, maybe.
I think so. Also, yeah, I mean, weapons and the consequences, I think, are much higher now. We're a good old-fashioned throwdown at a Garth Brooks concert or a bar in Boston at Last Call. It just can get so much ugly. Plus, I think everyone studies MMA now, too. So you could be putting a pretzel. You don't know who you're messing with.
I know. I
think you just tell kids to use you tell young men who are wired that way to use their powers for good. Don't be a fucking idiot.
Yeah. But it's hardwired. It's hardwired into us. And when you add alcohol, it's exciting. It's like, particularly if you win.
Yeah.
But my friend Steve Houck used to, he was a Boston guy, drank a lot. He was, he's not a super tall guy. He's probably 5'9", whatever. Great golfer, great guy. But, when he drinks some things, he got into a lot of fights at Denison and beyond. And he always is like, in my all-time record is 5-11. And he's like, he goes, I mostly lose.
But he engaged in so many fights when he was younger that he took even the losses as wins.
Yeah, he's a funny drunk. And so he would keep picking the fights and he would lose the fights. And it was so funny to hear.
When you're a fighter like that at that age, it's the old expression, like, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Mm-hmm.
So every situation you enter, you're just like, I gotta get in a fight. Something's gonna happen that's gonna turn me on. Like, this is crazy.
I almost got kicked out of high school as well over the exact words, perception is reality. Like, my junior year at prep school, Lake Forest Academy, this guy, we were smoking weed and whatever. We were getting into it. We were drinking a lot. We were kind of like, there were a couple of like hard drinking crews, and we were one. And we were in the dorm, and I remember how it started. We started snorting aspirin because we thought, well, it'll take care of the headache faster, right? We'll get it, the aspirin will jam it up and we'll snort it and whatever. And then we were like, well, we had pixie sticks because we're still 15, 16. So we started snorting pixie sticks. And then it was snuff, like that black, brown tobacco. We were snorting that. And it would, if you snorted your left nostril, a tear would pour down, and one tear would go down your eye, and do the right nostril, another tear would go down. You sit there going, anyway. And I remember the hall monitor, his name's Mr. Holcomb. He walked in, and we had these fat white lines sitting on our desks, and they were no-dos. And he goes, "What the hell is that?" And we're like, "No-dos." And he goes, "You guys." And then he walked away, and we'd snort him up. And because he couldn't say no to no-dos, right? Well, what's the problem? Right. So we were just starting to, the people were, whatever. And then one of the guys in my dorm was like, "We should try cocaine." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so we tried it at a party, and it was before fentanyl. And so I remember we were in like a motel, and three of us were jammed into a thing. We had like a quarter gram, and we're like, "Oh, that's the greatest." And from then on, we kind of were doing it. And the pack of friends I was with between junior year and senior year, 2 out of 5 got kicked out. And one of them, he and I, on the last day of school, we did ecstasy. We'd never done it before. It was still legal. And he got some pills, and it was like, I don't know, we heard it's good. So we're like, we'll take them, we'll go to this party. So we took them, and then we started packing up our rooms, and it was getting dark, and the hall teacher, whatever, was like, "Hey guys, it's too late to leave. Just stay the night." And we're like, no, School's over. The car's packed up. They're like, yeah, no problem. But just, you can stay the night and then you leave tomorrow. We're like, no, there's a party. We got to go. And so we just keep packing up. And he's like, you guys are going nowhere. You're staying here tonight. And I'm like, okay. I said, okay. And I walk in, and my friend Dave is like, as he's walking into the door, he goes, that's fucking bullshit. And the headmaster turns and looks at him and like that. And I was like, whatever. We got away with it, I guess. So then I hear over the summer, Dave calls me. He goes, they kicked me out of school. And I'm like, what? That's unacceptable. And my other friend was like, they kicked me out too. I'm like, what? So I'm like, I'm furious, right? And because we had our whole crew. They took 2 guys out of the crew. And I'm like, so I find myself at school like a few days later. I don't remember what I was doing. But the headmaster was, he had an office. I go up to the office and I'm like, you're making a mistake. And he goes, sit down. And I'm like, I said, you can't kick these guys out. What? They're kicking out for what? And he goes, cocaine. And I'm like, cocaine? I said, you're out of here. We're not doing cocaine. Nobody's doing cocaine. And he goes, let me tell you something. Perception is reality. And I'm like, wow. What? You perceive people to be doing cocaine, so you kick them out? He goes, yeah. And I'm like, it's not even true. Right. He goes, the only reason you're not kicked out is because you're A- average. You're working hard. You got those grades, and I can't kick you out. But I tell you what, I'm watching you, and I'm gonna get you. Like that. I was like, and
that's he's telling you that it doesn't matter if they were doing it or not. The perception of that group of those 5 guys was like that. That's right. And he had to prune the garden.
That's right. And one of them was doing it, and the other one was not. He was just a bad student. He just got a C- average, and they kicked him out. He ended up going to military school, and he's like, to this final day, he's like, I didn't do it. And I had to tell his parents, I'm like, he didn't. And I had to tell his parents, I didn't do it, but I did. And the capper on this story is amazing, because they would announce these room searches at Lake Forest Academy. And what we would do, now I don't keep anything in my room. It's a 1-strike policy. And beer, any drugs, nothing. No, not at all. But when they'd announce the search, because they didn't want us to get kicked out. And so everybody who had beer would take it out to the woods. We had 250 acres of woods, and they'd hide it and come back in. But then when they do the search, bring the beer back in, whatever. And so I am like in my advisor period on Monday morning. They've done the search on Thursday or Friday. And my advisor's like, we have to go see the vice principal. And I'm like, about what? And he goes, can't tell you. And I'm like, okay. So now we're walking through because everybody's in their advisor period. We're walking through.
It's the worst feeling when you're
we're walking through the empty halls of fucking Lake Forest Academy. There's nobody in the hall because just me and him. And I'm like, what's going on? He goes, we'll find out soon. And so we get to that vice principal's office. And at my school, when a kid's getting kicked out, they lower the shades so you can't see inside the glass, right? And
it's like the Pope, the white smoke or black smoke.
That's right. I'm walking, and everybody gathers around and goes, "Who's in there? Who's in there?" And I'm walking in, and the secretary's lowering the shades. I'm like, "What are you lowering the shades for?" I'm like, "Don't lower the shades."
I'm lower the shades.
I told her, I'm like, "Don't lower." She's like, "I gotta lower the shades." What'd you do? And she said, "Just do." And I sit down across from the vice principal and my teacher, who's my advisor, who's a close person to me and my sister. The vice principal goes, "Would you mind telling me what this is?" And he puts down a little snow seal. You know what a snow seal is, right?
Yeah.
A snow seal is, well, for those of you who don't, people used to take like a little folded piece of paper. They put the cocaine in and they'd fold it up into like a little seal. So it's like about that big. And you would carry you carry it in your wallet or whatever.
I thought you were talking about a creature from the Arctic. Never mind. Go on.
I see. You don't know what it is. Okay. So he puts a snow seal down on the table, and there is this Indian writing on the outside. I remember, like the Indian newspaper. And I'm like, and I open it, and I dip my finger in it, and he goes, "Don't do that." And I go, and I said, "This is Vibhuti." I said, "This is Indian ash. It's sacred Indian ash." I said, "Where'd you get it?" And he goes, "It's what?" And I'm like, "Where'd you get it?" And he goes, "Well, we there was a picture on your desk, and we took it apart." I'm like, "Oh, that picture of the Indian god my grandmother gave me when I was born." Took it apart, and he had it, and it was like they'd taken it apart, and this Vibhuti had been in there since it's an Indian ash, right? It's like sacred, and it would have been in there since I was born. It had never been opened, this thing, since I got it. And he goes,
"Wait, you're not bullshitting?"
No, it's Vibhuti.
I thought you did.
Yes, and I'm like, and he goes, "Oh, we're sending it to a lab." I said, "Great, send it to a lab." Excited, and he goes, "You're kicked out until you're on suspension until the lab results come back." And the teacher goes, "You're going to violate his legal rights over while we don't have proof that he's even committed anything?" And the guy goes, "Well, hold on a second here." And so that I'm like, I said, "Okay, so he goes, okay, I guess you can stay, but you're going down. When we get the lab results, you go down." I'm like, "Fantastic." I said, "I can't wait for the fucking results." And I swear, because I'm like, I got this motherfucker. So then we're walking out, me and the teacher, and I'm like, "Raise the shades." Like, I am so cocky. And I come out, there's 50 people waiting. And I'm like, "No problem. We're good."
What booty? It was the booty.
Yeah, because you're supposed to be escorted off the fucking premises. And everyone's like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "I'm going to class." And they're like, "What the hell?" And so then my parents get a call a few days later, and they're like, "We would like to apologize for how we treated your son. We know there's a religious issue around this." And they sent a letter of apology. And my mom was like, "Yeah. You got." I mean, she didn't know, but she's like,
"Yeah, It was like there was a little bit of getting Al Capone on tax evasion.
That's right.
She knew something was.
She loved it, and from then on, it was senior spring. I was untouchable. Like I would leave campus in my car and with my buddies. Like we would sneak off campus, and I would drive my car out. All my friends would be in the back seat with coats over them, pretending like there's just me in the car. And nobody did a fucking thing. Nothing. They're like, just get him out of here. Just get him.
It's Vibhuti? Is that the actual?
It's Vibhuti.
Vibhuti. And it looks like it's a powdered, white.
It's basically like, I don't know how they create the ash, but it's it's literally white ash. And it tastes
they must have been looking
way.
For them to look for that in your room. I mean, they were coming after you because of your buddy.
Thorough search. I mean, of course, I didn't have anything, right? They weren't going to find anything. That's why when they found that, I'm like, "You're fucked."
You didn't get me. Right. No, that was the amazing thing about me getting kicked out of college is in prep school, I had done everything to get kicked out, and it was a much stricter environment. Closer proximity, the stakes are higher. You're there all the time. You literally don't leave. And I was unscathed. And then you go into a more consequence-free environment, and that's when you get the cuffs put on you.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't make sense.
I was going to say, what do you think of the Bears this weekend?
I don't want to talk about the Bears because they're so horrible, but I will talk about them. But just one more on the high school drug story. The first time and being judged, there was two guys I was in school with, and this is 15 years old. And one of these guys was all the persona of a stoner before he had even touched marijuana. like just kind of, yeah, man, like long hair, like I got this, like, and so the teachers were after him to the nth degree, and it ended up being like a self-fulfilling prophecy because he became a huge stoner.
Right.
But the first time I'd ever bought weed was with him and another buddy in Boston. We were off campus for the weekend, and we were teenagers, and we went to an area of Boston where you could buy it. And it was me, Morgan, my buddy Tex, and we were like, who's going to do this transaction? Like, who knows how to speak this language? And Morgan's like, I got this, guys. I know how to do it. Just relax. And we're like, all right, Morgan's got it, clearly, you know. So we go up to this guy, and he has, they just have nuggets. They're selling it in like kind of fistfuls, marijuana buds. And the guy comes up and he's like, what do you guys need? And Morgan goes, I'm about to answer. Morgan shoots me a look. Then Tex is about to answer. He shoots Tex a look like I'm the guy to do it.
Well, what?
And he goes, what do you got? The guy goes, he pulls out these 3 buds and he goes, I got 3 for 30. And Morgan goes, how about 2 for 25? You fucking idiot. That was the first time we got it.
That's so funny.
The Bears. What do I think of the Bears? I think it's hard to raise your children Bears fans.
Well, just to be sort of, just to give the audience who doesn't watch the Bears context, they had a 12-point lead with 5 minutes to go. According to the computer, they had a 92.4% chance of winning at that point. And, you know, this is a team that is rebuilding. And in my view, since they added Vontez Sweat, the defensive end, that defense has made a big jump. Like they're actually the number 2 run defense in football after the Eagles. Like they're a legit. To me, they're starting to look like something. And that we put the beating down on Detroit that whole fucking game, except for the last 5 minutes, should mean something. Like I think they're on the road to something. And as somebody in entertainment, I'm always reluctant to criticize other people in entertainment, and I consider football players to be in entertainment, right? So, at the end of that game, I'm like, fire the coach. And I said that to myself, and I said that to my brother-in-law, who's a Bears fan, and he agreed. But I mean, you know, the reason is because what they went for when they had the ball is they went 2 runs right up the gut. The whole defense was there, and then they threw a bomb, which was like 40 yards. And you're like, to me, you know, obviously, I'm not a football coach, but I felt like I could have coached it a little different, like a little screen pass or a look around to the outside. Fields had 100 yards. I mean, there might be some way to move the chase. Just 1 or 2 first downs would have been the game. And I know it's, you know, it's hard, but I think they're on the road to something great.
I do too. And it's what I get frustrated talking to other Bears fans because you can't be playing BBD, bigger, better deal at the position of quarterback when you just staked your franchise on Justin Fields. And he is exceptional and he's amazing. He set the not even just for an early stage player, he set the rushing record for a quarterback in NFL history. He ran the most yards like 2 years ago or last season. Second. And then he came back second. Yeah, he didn't play in the last game, so he would have broken.
He was second to the Baltimore guy.
To the Baltimore guy. Who it's the biggest, you know, we talked about this earlier. It's the biggest, the NFL, you know, the field's 100 yards long. The guys are 6'5". They can, there's just so few places you can put the ball to make a pass, and they're fast that you need a quarterback who can run into today's game. And I think Fields is that. And the conversation that's really frustrating for me lately, this season especially, is the kid coming out of USC, Caleb. Is it Williams? The USC. Everyone's like, let's just sell the farm and pick him. And no, you're just going to start over again. No. We already started over. Just build around this guy and let him carry the torch a little longer.
He is going to be I think he's going to be fucking great. And I already think he's pretty goddamn good. So I'm not, I don't think they should. I mean, look, I don't think they should fire Eberflus, even though the record isn't great. But I mean, the record isn't great because the players weren't great, but they're getting better. I don't know. To me, I hope they go on a little run. And I'd like to stay with this coach, maybe get a new defensive coordinator because maybe you should have one. But even though the defense is good, I mean, I think, and we got great draft picks coming up, and we got a lot of money in free agency available to us. I think there's great things ahead. It is dark as dark as it was. But as dark as it was, it wasn't as bad as losing to Aaron Rodgers 55 times in the last minute like we always do.
That was dark, and we had a great defense when that was happening too.
Yeah. So
I was watching the Chiefs-Eagles game last night, and so many guys were making plays. I mean, those are two great teams, probably two of the best teams, and for the last couple of years, and probably for the next couple of years, those are like two stalwart, incredible teams. And they're like, when you realize that individual guys making big plays in those games, that's a real team. Like they're doing it with each other. And what happens is they become stars. And then they end up signing free agent contracts and leaving and going to another team. But they don't have that same chutzpah again in their career, because what it is it's a moment in time when a bunch of guys are playing great together.
Yeah.
There's a core group and you build around that. So to your point, the Bears have a good core, and I think they should keep building around that core and not throw everything away.
Yeah.
Yet, at least for another.
Yeah, I think the GM is good. The GM
season.
polls is, he's proven to be pretty goddamn good. And he got Sweat, and then he signed him to a 4-year deal. I mean, this is great news.
You do it in pieces. You figure out what's working, and then you build around it. Because we kind of talked about we're going to ask each other questions today. I wanted to ask you, based coming off that story, it doesn't have to be Bears, but what's your greatest sports memory? One that you've witnessed.
That I witnessed. Without a doubt, and I don't have all the details to it, but it was Jim McMahon was injured on Monday Night Football against the Vikings, and he was hounding Mike Ditka to let him get in the game. And the Bears were down, might have been 12 or 14 or 16, whatever. They were down. And you could see him playing the sidelines, just hounding Mike Ditka. And I'm not sure if this is the same game, but they gave him a pain shot in public on the cameras.
Yeah. Right.
And then he gets in the game. And on the first play, he throws a bomb to Willie Gault, and boom, it's 7 points. And to me, it was the most incredible, the greatest. And the Bears won the game. They came back and they scored 16 points and won the game against Minnesota in a game that was certainly lost. I mean, we did to Minnesota what Stafford, not Stafford, who's the Goff just did to us. Just came in and just ate us up. In an impossible game. You're never going to win. They were never going to win. Detroit was never going to win. And the Bears won that. And what it said to me was, this guy believes he can do anything. And he can seemingly do anything. And it gave me, as like a 16-year-old or whatever it was, 15-year-old, immense confidence in myself. I was like, he can do anything. He's part of me. I'm the Chicago Bears with them. I can do anything. And then when Michael Jordan came to town and rolled through, I'm like, I can do anything.
Yeah, it checks
out. Michael
out.
Jordan. I mean, I would say all sorts of outlandish shit to Kevin Heffernan about, because he was a Knicks fan. And I would make outlandish bets. And every fucking game, Michael Jordan would fucking cash that check. And I'm like, I'm a winner. Guess I'm a winner.
It helped the shit talking game so much in school growing up with that team.
And my favorite, I mean, I've sort of sloshed together two things, but when the Bulls were going for that 6th ring, I was so cocky to Heffernan. I'm like, I said, for Michael and Scotty, this campaign for the 6th ring, it's one for the dick. They have no more room. They've got no more room. And
it was the second Utah win, right?
Yeah, that's right. They beat Utah in 6 games in 98.
All of those Bulls memories, I got to go to some of those games, were right up there at the top for me, the greatest sports I've witnessed. I did get to go to a Super Bowl right after I'd gotten kicked out of school. I happened to be in California that year when the Super Bowl was in San Diego, and it was the Super Bowl that John Elway won with the Broncos.
Yeah.
So it was like that late stage.
Yeah.
And they were playing the Packers.
Yes.
And so it was like 2 of the greatest, and I was at the game. And Elway, there was a famous run that took place because he was old and his knees didn't work, but he could still, manage the game. He was a game manager, much like Peyton Manning was when he beat the Bears in that the early Super Bowl we went to.
Yeah.
And I saw him that play. It was like 3rd down and 6 yards, and Elway ran it and he dove, and it's the one where he spun in the air full. He got hit in his legs and he did a full helicopter. That was seeing one of the greatest quarterbacks play in the Super Bowl and not be able to run and pick up the first down while spinning through the air.
That's for me. That was
one
of the highlights of the NFL. That spinning shot. It's like one of the most famous.
It was just the way he wasn't athletic enough to like ball himself up or make it look cool. He was just diving and he was parallel to the ground and he got hit. And he twirled around.
That's awesome. That was against Favre, right?
Yeah, it was against Favre.
That's sweet.
Who, as a Bears fan, for me, they were both very difficult quarterbacks to root against, Favre and then Rodgers. I felt, because I loved the way that both those guys played,
and I loved his Mississippi kind of the way he spoke. He was from Mississippi, right? Or Louisiana,
the swagger of.
I mean, the guy was incredible. And it was painful. I don't want to discount the pain. There was a lot of pain, but he wasn't hated in Chicago because he was sort of like us. And Rodgers, look, Rodgers owns Chicago in the same way, and he was not as beloved in Chicago by a long shot, and part of it has to do with he's from California, and we were like, fuck California. And
in general, though, it's hard in general to root against. Listen, the Bears-Packers rivalry is one of the oldest in sports. It's incredible. It's Vince Lombardi and George Halas. It's all of the people who founded not just the sports as owners, but they came up with the offenses. There's a lineage to the game, like certain formations and stuff. Like you coach under that guy, so you learn that. That's why you run this offense. You're part of this lineage. But for me, it's really hard to root against a small market team, especially Green Bay, because there's no reason in the world why they should even have a professional franchise.
No,
if you look at the economics of it.
It's true.
And they're such underdogs, and it means so much to those fans. And you look at, LA having 2 teams in a $4 billion stadium. Like, okay, yeah, I get it. But like Green Bay or Buffalo, like, that's a fun team to root for because
I agree.
You're back against them all.
I agree. But I still, even though if I met Rodgers, I'm sure we'd be friends. I cannot bring myself to say that I like Aaron Rodgers at all. and I say this because this actually happened to me once. I went to Eric Stolhansky's wedding, his second wedding in Minneapolis. And it was in the middle of like November, and the Vikings had just eaten Chicago alive, and it was because we just couldn't block Jared Allen. He just was like, it was in the season that I think he either tied the record or came a half a sack short of it. And so they just played Monday Night Football, and they just just destroyed us. And, I don't know if you remember, but there was a while in Chicago at that moment where we're like, fucking hate Jared Allen. of how fucking Jared Allen, fucking asshole, fucking ruining our fucking game. And so I show up at this wedding on a Friday, and I'm like, go to this party, and there's fucking Jared Allen. I'm like, Jared. And he looks at me, he goes, dude, what's up? Like that. And I'm like, how are you? And immediately we became buddies. Like we're actually we're friends. We're legitimate friends. You know, I call him up, we talk, you know, and I'm like, it's just a good example of like all this, like it made me stop being so vicious about football players or baseball players and all that stuff. So I'm like, they're just guys like us. They just try. Yeah. They're just doing their best. They're just super talented. So they blew up the Bears. Okay, well, that's the way it goes. We've done it to other teams too. So and it changed my view of the way I talk about Rodgers. You know, I wanted to beat him while he was in Green Bay. Once he left, I'm like, he left owning us, and we'll never beat him because we never beat him with the Green Bay Packer uniform on. And I'm like, maybe we'll beat him with the Jets, but we probably won't. It's
not the same.
Yeah,
it's not the same.
But we probably won't beat him with the Jets either because it's just, I mean, scheduling and blah, blah, right? But I mean, that guy, you know, it's like a hollow part of my heart that will never get him. We'll never get him.
He escaped unscathed. I don't even the stuff that he says now, people think he's really controversial. I just think if you're a professional athlete, that the stuff with that he got, like the vaccines, he got so crucified on that issue. It's like these guys are, you know, all they think about is health and what they put in their body and the output, input. And, you know, he just didn't want to put something into his system that could have messed up years of work. And he was treated as if he was a villain as a result of it. It was hard. I think it was more courageous for him to do what he did than it was villainous, I guess.
You and I have spoken about this off camera, and we have. I mean, I understand that you're vaccinated, and your kids are vaccinated. So, but you know, look, I'll say this: I'm a child of Indian doctors, and my uncle would come over for Thanksgiving dinner, and he'd like, "You come here," and he'd take out his black bag, and he'd just go quirk. He'd give me the other shoulder.
Snort this. I thought it was the.
He would just crank me up with the vaccines. He goes to my sister, "You come here," and he fucking just and we're like, "What is it?" He goes, "Don't worry about it. Just now you can go to school." And so it's always been my attitude, which is that I let like I could have been a doctor had I not been such a drunk, but I couldn't wake up at 8 a.m. and go to the organic chemistry class, so I just sort of went once every now. Got a C-, got scrubbed out. But I have such a reverence for scientists and doctors that I'm like, you guys do the science, I'll do the comedy, and you guys can laugh at what I do. And when you do the science, just tell me, just stick it in my fucking arm. Can we just be done with it? And the reality of vaccines is that if we don't all do them, theoretically, it's not going to work. So when Aaron Rodgers did that, I was like, shut the fuck up and take the shot. And I get it. I know his body, his choice. But I would say that he was not a little misleading. He was misleading about having been vaccinated. So he should just say, I didn't get vaccinated.
Well, I would attribute that more as a positive, because at that time when he didn't take the vaccine and he was misleading, he could have blown it up right there and gotten on the bully pulpit and said, I'm not taking the shot. You know, I don't care. He could have done that there, but he just said, I've been protected, or he had some, way around it. So I think it was actually in service to how he handled it. He didn't start proselytizing about the vaccines at that point before we knew what we know now about them. Just terms of we now know more things. I'm not saying they're all negative, but they weren't the silver bullet that they were being portrayed at that time were going to be. And he was like, I'm not going to take the air out of everyone, but I'm not doing it for me. And he stayed quiet. And then when they started coming at him with the arrows, now he's much more vocal, as are many more people about it. So, that's, to me, makes him more of a leader than somebody who was just being petulant and didn't want to do it. Like Djokovic didn't want to take the vaccine before the US Open. He was on the heels. I think at the time he was tied for most Grand Slam titles in history, or he was like one behind.
Yeah.
He missed the US Open as a result of not taking that vaccine.
Which I thought
wasn't even allowed.
Madness.
It's right, but
and he's won. Look at me. I'm good.
Right, but he's won a couple since then, so it took away that crucial argument. But there's a case where if he didn't play in that U.S. Open, and let's say he blew out his ACL on the treadmill the next day, that they would have been robbing him of that opportunity to, transcend tennis. It just telling an athlete what to put in there. There's rules of like the steroid issues and things like that, but imposing something on someone on anyone, but especially an elite athlete who's in the spotlight. I just more on the side of human choice for those guys to do it. I wouldn't.
I hear you. I just fully disagree. Like I get it, but I guess I'll say this, and it's back to what I said before, which is that I've known a lot of athletes, and in fact, Ryan Leaf is one of the, and you guys are smart. You're smart people. But I don't want to take medical advice from charismatic football players and tennis players. Like I understand they're good at
they're not giving
the right
advice,
smoothies,
right?
And they take good stretching, and that I'd listen to. But when it comes to the efficacy of a fucking vaccine, I'm like, I'll just talk to the doctor. That's all.
Right.
That's all.
Right. Well, Ryan's case was different. Because there's two separate things. I mean, the pharmaceutical industry pretty much injected opioids into our entire country. And then 10 years later, everyone's like, whoa. Now everyone's addicted to heroin. We got to pull back. What do you mean? You gave me a tennis ball can of pills.
Right. It's a good example
at my last office visit.
The medical establishment not having our best interests at heart. It's a great example.
Like recently. Before, I'm not even talking lobotomies. Yeah. We can go back. This is just happened in the last 10 years.
True. But think of all the great things that medicine has also done for us. I mean,
it's not black or white. Each issue is totally different, right? So I would think that someone would have a choice. I'm not going to knock Rogers. I am curious to see if he. By the way, I love that we had that whole conversation without any statistics. We don't need the science to go into it. We're just bullshitting on the vaccine.
Don't come to comedians asking for vaccine advice. We don't know anything. Right. All these guys with podcasts are like, oh, here's what I think. And I'm like, who gives a fuck?
Who gives a fuck? You're not a doctor. You're not part of this.
No.
It's true.
No. I don't give a fuck. It's
true.
It's like, I wouldn't go to my, kid and ask him, hey, can you build me a telescope? He doesn't fucking know how.
He doesn't fucking know. No. That actually dovetails into a question I wanted to ask you randomly, but now it's right on point. What's the biggest health improvement you've made in your life?
I'm always reluctant
getting the vaccine.
Dude.
Getting the vaccine and not playing in the US Open.
I'm going to go get the next COVID vaccine today. I'm getting it. I'm fucking getting it. You know why? Because I'm stubborn like that. I'm like, fuck you. I'm going to get the vaccine, and I hope all you motherfuckers die of COVID. I hope you're all dead and just me with my vaccine left over. That's how I feel about it. The greatest. Okay, I have a couple.
They're like, Jay, you were just in here last week. The vaccine doesn't work like that. You're like, no, again.
Give it to me again. I want a 6 shot.
Give me a big button that said I'm vaccinated.
That's right. I wore one of those after the first time I got vaccinated, and I posted it on Twitter, and someone wrote, "Who gives a fuck?" And I'm like, "Whoa, you're right. You're totally right. You're right. Who gives a fuck? You're right. I don't give a fuck. I hope you die of fucking COVID." I didn't type that, but I thought that. The greatest health thing. I'm always a little reluctant to talk about health because I'm from Chicago, and I like Chicago people to think of me is one of them. And health in Chicago,
we don't think of our health.
No. I think if you think, oh, this fucking fruitcake moved out to California, he's all into health now. And but I'm going to tell you anyway because yes, and you're from Chicago, so you get it. But I mean, can you really say a place that eats that much beef and puts blue cheese into
sausage,
olives and martinis at Gibson's? Do you really give a fuck about health? I mean, come on. This is
on the whole, I think, right.
We were Fat City, USA, multiple years in a row until Houston took the record from us. Houston's now Fat City, USA, but we were right there. You know, like
is that like a pound for pound per capita?
I don't know. They fucking gave a trophy out for it. But but I'll admit it. I'm now much healthier. I'll tell you my health advances. I started at one point taking I had asthma, and what they figured out is, in my case, if you controlled stomach acid, the asthma disappeared. And that's what the scientists fucking figured it out. Stomach acid was triggering my asthma. And so they controlled the stomach acid, and then the asthma basically disappeared. I carry an inhaler around, but I don't use it. I use it once every 5 6 months.
They control the stomach acid. That's like gut health, right? So they you take Tums or something if you're having an asthma attack?
Yeah, it's like Nexium. You take it prophylactically in advance, and then eventually. Now I don't really have asthma. And the other thing is I started intermittent fasting because Indians are generally more likely to get diabetes, type 2 diabetes. I guess because of their diet, or I don't know what. My dad has it. And he's like, if you don't control your weight, you're going to get it. And so I started intermittent fasting, which is basically I eat at, Chicago's like, fuck this guy. I eat at noon, which is right now. I can't wait to go down and eat. And then I'll eat at 8 o'clock at night, and then I don't eat again until noon. So it's 16 hours off. And
that's like, you're calling that fasting? That's just skipping a meal.
No,
dude.
That's what it's called. That's the fucking definition. It's a 16-hour It's a 16-hour fast.
That's fasting. You're eating 3 out of 4 meals, and you're calling that fasting?
2 meals. I'm eating 2 meals. 2 meals. Now,
you're eating lunch, dinner, and then you're skipping breakfast and eating lunch again.
That's right. So
intermittent fasting is like sunrise to sunset, maybe a couple days of water. Like just
no. That's not intermittent. That's just fasting. Intermittent fasting is something you do every day. And what happens is at a certain point around hour 12, 13, 14, 15, whatever it is, your body needs energy and it doesn't have like sugar from the meal. And so it eats your fat storages. And to me, intermittent fasting, I can turn my weight up and down like a fucking knob. I can just, no problem. And that to me has made me healthier. I think. Maybe I'll still die early.
No, that's a big one. The thing that I guess I do that kind of naturally, just based on what's happening. If I'm not starving, I'm not going to eat. Like I like to eat when I'm hungry, and then then it doesn't matter what you eat. Just eat when you're hungry. You can eat anything.
Psychologically, you want a little something in the morning, or 3 square meals, and all that stuff. And I'm not saying you should do it. I don't care if you do it. I'm just saying I do. Whatever.
Right, and I think it is. I guess you're supposed to even do it longer than that to really have. You can shock your body if you go a day, 2 days.
You can, but at some point you want to keep healthy. You don't want to put stress.
The weight thing to me was always, I talked to trainers and stuff about it. It's always just like what you put in, calories out.
Yeah.
It's like you could think of all this other stuff about diet and when you eat or anything. It's just like, if you put in a lot, you got to burn that much more.
Yeah.
It's just like the easiest thing. I started lifting heavy weights again after not doing it for a long time. And that was probably the biggest health change I've made recently. It makes I burn more calories. I don't have to go on a treadmill to burn off stuff. I just bench press and squat and deadlift. And
who spots you, Allie? Hayes' wife is Ally Larder, the famous actress.
So I can go in. She's usually not around, but I don't know if she could spot me doing. No, just the guy next to you at the gym. I go to like. I started going to a not one of those health clubs that they have a smoothie bar or any of those places, like just like a fucking gym where like the equipment's old and people are in there still with weight belts and there's chalk.
Nice.
Yeah, like those are places I like to go work out and lift and throw your headphones on and just throw around metal. And it's so like, it's not a practice like yoga or Pilates. It's just like it's just kind of old school. But you just feel, I know I have relatives, my stepfather in particular, he's in his 80s. He still lifts weights and it's served him great because it's the muscular skeleton. Yeah, Bill.
Yeah.
He'll and that's how he keeps, the cardio, not as much, but he keeps the skeletal muscular stuff. You burn more calories and you keep everything intact. Like ligaments don't pop out.
He was in
like
shape
that because you're working.
In shape when I first met him back in like 1984.
Yeah, it's always been his thing, the health and lifting in particular.
So we should get on to the vouch because I think we're running. We're like a couple yentas.
I still have so many questions.
We'll have to do it another time. So I'll vouch first. So I have an app called Vouch Vault. You post your favorite stuff in the world: music, television, books. Today, my vouch is for Arnold's new book, Be Useful. What is it? 7 Tools for Life. What I like about this photo is, you ever see The Fantastic Mr. Fox?
Sure.
You remember the whiskers and all the detail of his whiskers? I feel like these whiskers are really like detailed.
Yep.
And I think that he also...
Dude, it's cool. You're attracted to Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's not the first person.
I like his whiskers. And he did probably about 100 photos, I bet. A bunch of them probably smiling. And he goes, that one.
That's the one.
Smiling.
Yeah.
I like that. I think that's a gutsy move on the front of a book. Most people on the front of the book are like this. But not Arnold.
Do you and how's the advice in the book? Have you gotten into it?
It's great because you read it in his voice, And he's just like...
You got to be useful. You wake up in the morning, you make your bed.
A few months after I left the governor's office in 2011, my world came crashing down around me. And you're like, fuck yeah, dude.
Gosh, I'm in.
He's awesome. I love it.
Do you think... he's incredible. Do you think if there was a clause in the Constitution that didn't say you had to be born in the United States to be president... So he's president. Do you think there would be more or less wars right now? Let's say he's currently in office.
I think as much as we kind of knock him for being a bodybuilder and an actor and whatever, I think he's a man of great wisdom. And I think, sure, he doesn't know all the details of everything, but who does? Like, there's some real heavy policy wonks in D.C. who could advise him on that. But he's a legit leader, in my view, and would be a great president. We're not in any wars now, the U.S.
No, but right. Well, do you think globally there would be more or less? I mean, I think there is a version where he would have stepped right into that role after being governor, and he could even do it now. But there's that little law in the Constitution.
Him because, I mean, look, I know he's a Republican, but I like the Republicans when they're anti-Russia, and I know you dated a Russian, I get, but I don't, be real honest with you, I'm still stuck in the anti-Russian mentality, and I don't want to leave it, and I won't leave.
Yeah,
and I want this country to be unified against our common enemy, which is Russia. So I'll tell you that. So I think he would have been a great guy to say, look, I mean, Biden is definitely anti-Russian because he's fucking, how could you not be? I'd be embarrassed to be pro-Russian. I'd be embarrassed.
Did I tell you that? So my grandfather, my dad's dad, was a tail gunner in a B-24 bomber. And those were the planes like Memphis Belle, that movie that it was their main way of attacking. You know, you'd carpet bomb, you'd go over with a fleet, you'd fly in a formation, and you'd just drop a bunch of bombs. And you have to get low to drop them if you wanted them to land where you wanted them to land.
I see. High risk.
And he got shot down over Germany or over Italy, but it was under German control. The Luftwaffe was a specific wing of the German Nazi military. And
I didn't like the Nazis at all, but I love that name, Luftwaffe.
Luftwaffe. It sounds like a meal, like a dish you would order or something. Like I'll have the Luftwaffe.
Yeah, something like with a wafer crust over something. You know,
like
you'd have it at a coffee shop.
The most villainous fighting army we've ever faced. So he got shot down, and he realized after the war that usually the main target that when you're trying to take down a B-24 is you shoot the tail gunner so you can come up behind the plane and shoot the plane down.
Oh,
but they got clipped on the wing. He had to eject. He pulls the chute. He free falls much longer than you're normally supposed to before he pulls the chute because you're taught when your plane shot down in a dogfight that you want to get through the fighting. You don't want to be dangling in the middle of a dogfight where bullets are shooting everywhere. You want to get low enough and then pull the chute so you're clear. I mean, all these stories are crazy. Yeah. And he pulled his chute low to the ground, busted both of his eardrums, landed next to a little village. And they gave a lot of the servicemen in World War II horse pills. They're like, honestly, the size of like a golf ball. And they were taught to swallow. When you landed, you were supposed to immediately go into your vest and take this pill so you could run as far away from where you landed as possible. Because, you know, when people were coming out of the sky, the Germans could see where you landed, then they'd go and capture you. So the United States military gave these guys these horse pills. And what you realize is they gave them amphetamines, essentially. So you wouldn't sleep for 48 hours. You would just be getting as far away from where you fell as possible. So he gets shot down. He takes the horse pill and he runs for 2 straight days. And he ends up hiding in a haystack, and then he ends up getting captured. The point of my story is to get back to the Russians.
I was hoping there might be like an Italian daughter in the farm. God.
A 18-year-old virgin took him in the haystack, and that's my grandmother. No,
one could hope.
No. He went to a Nazi prison camp, and he was there, and he's there for 13 months. And the Germans are they're at the mess hall, and he gets in an argument with a chef. I call him a chef, but the guy putting slop on his plate, because the guy who's putting slop on his plate says, let me see if I can do a German accent. You guys should not be fighting us. We are more like you. You should be fighting the Russians. They are the enemies. They are the real enemies. And he was like, fuck you. And the guy the chef put the fork right in his hand, just stabbed his hand onto the table with the thing. But he still told that story because, you know, I was probably talking to him about this when I was, 10 or 11. He was saying, the Russians are the enemies. It was also like during the Cold War. But he was like reiterating, don't lose track of the narrative that even though we fought on the same side in World War II, they're the bad guys. Yeah. And then it all went away for a long time, and we started giving them pipelines and shit. And guess what? They were still the enemy.
That's right. That's right.
So I think, to answer my own question, if Arnold was president, I think probably maybe less wars. I think Putin probably watched a lot of movies, and as a master of propaganda would think that Arnold has maybe the upper hand and would not go to war with him. I vouch for, I'm going to change my vouch because I just saw the documentary Sly with Sylvester Stallone. And it was...
Yes, right.
I think I mentioned it before. I don't know if it was my vouch.
No, it wasn't.
I'm vouching for it because it's also incredible and goes back through a career, much like the one Arnold had. But the movie Sly is he walks through every movie because he created the franchises. He wrote a lot of his stuff. And he's also very different from Arnold because Sylvester Stallone was an action hero, but he was like super emotional.
Yeah.
Like he fucking, like Rocky was always crying.
Yeah.
Like Rocky was like a character, but the first movie, Rocky, is like, it's like an independent film, you know, with not a lot of action, not a lot of boxing. And even in Rocky 4, when everything's so amped up, he's in the ring and he's bawling and Rambo, he talked about in the documentary, Rambo was another character study about a Vietnam vet coming back into society, and society is not accepting him. America's not at that point. And he's like a stone cold killer. And the first version of Rambo that Sylvester Stallone read, the guy was just a killing machine and a badass. And Stallone in the documentary talks about, he's like, no, I want this guy to be not talk, one, except for this one giant monologue that he drops where he's like, it's like a 3-page monologue to Colonel Traubman. And he's like, you understand, the guys, they all died, Colonel, they all died. Like, he gives like one speech and then he doesn't talk. So Sly was, they both kind of needed each other, like any, thing that happens. Two great sports teams come at the same time. They need each other. They're competing against each other. Sly talks about the rivalry with Arnold, but they're completely different performers and actors. Like, I don't think Sylvester Stallone could be a politician that we would be talking about being the president of the United States. But I did think after watching the documentary that he doesn't get enough credit for being an actor, not just an action star. So I vouch for that.
Do you know where you can see it?
Sly is on Netflix.
I'll watch it. To me, the greatest line in a movie ever was in Rambo. And it was Richard Crenna's line. And basically he tries to convince Richard Crenna's the colonel. He tries to convince Brian Dennehy to just put the guns down and let him walk out of there. Let him get out of that woods. Just let him go. And Dennehy's like, you out of your mind? I got 75 guys out there with guns. We're just going to let him go? And Crenna's like, and Denny's walking away, and he goes, if you're going to go through with this, you're going to need one thing. And Denny goes, what's that? He goes, a good supply of body bags. And you're like, oh, this dude.
They were so good.
The best. All right, Ace, that was a good one. I enjoyed it.
That was great, Jay.
All right, that's it.
All right, thanks, guys.
Mustache Tales.